Hi, I'm David Boje, and this film was about the goathead, and sometimes I'm the goathead. I was recently missed a meeting with an important colleague, and I missed it twice in the same week. And today I'm going to actually make the meeting. So I'm going to stop being the goatheads. So goatheads are these little thorny things in the desert in New Mexico where I live. And after a few rains, they just multiply and multiply into millions of them here on our ranch. And we have to go pick them all up. We have to root out the plant and pick up 100 goat heads from each plant. It's amazing. And if you don't clear the goat heads out of your life in the being of existence, which this is about, then your whole story of leadership falls apart. So that's what this is about. Now, I have one thing to share with you. When it refers to buoy, like a buoy in the ocean to guide ships so they don't bounce into something, Boje means buoy. David means beloved, and Michael stands for the Archangel Michael. So beloved Archangel Buoy is the name that I inherited from my parents. So when you hear the word buoy, think of me, and sometimes my buoy is a goat head.
Have you ever wondered why some leaders seem to build something that lasts, while others just crash and burn in a huge scandal? Well, we're going to dig into a really powerful leadership framework from Dr. David Michael Boje that has a fascinating answer. And it's all about learning to face what he calls the goat head world. I mean, it's a question we see play out all the time, right? You see it in the news constantly. There's this celebrated leader, a super successful company, and then boom, a scandal breaks, and the entire story we were told just completely implodes. Why does this happen over and over again? And this quote from the source material really just nails it. The core idea is that the stories these leaders tell are often built on a seriously weak foundation. It says that if the narrative isn't real, if it's not authentic from the very beginning, it is absolutely destined to collapse into that disaster movie we're all so familiar with. So, okay, how does this actually happen? Well, it all starts with how leaders build their own reality. They create these narratives, these stories. But the problem is, these stories are almost always incomplete, and that's exactly where the trouble begins. Think about it like this. Reality is just this infinite field of information, right? All the stuff that's happening. The little pieces we pick out to tell our story, the source calls these story seeds. These are the raw, unfiltered facts, events, and details that we choose to include in our narrative. But here's the catch. And this is where everything can go sideways. We immediately run those story seeds through our story filters. What are those? They're our biases, our assumptions, our need for a simple, clean plot. These filters strip out all the messy complexity to create a story that feels coherent, but is actually a massive distortion of what's really going on. To make this really concrete, the source uses this fantastic analogy. Imagine your world isn't some perfect, manicured garden. Instead, it's a desert landscape that's constantly being invaded by goat heads. Those awful, thorny weeds that stick to everything. That is the messy, complex reality that leaders actually have to deal with. Now, this next slide highlights a really key distinction. So think of being, with a capital B, as the entire messy reality, the whole desert, goat heads, and all. Then you have being, with a small b, which is just one single thing inside that reality, a person, a company, or, even one of those goat heads. The big mistake leaders make is they focus only on their own little being while totally ignoring the huge reality of being all around them. That's the trap. So how in the world are you supposed to navigate this goat head world without filtering out the truth? Well, Dr. Boje proposes a framework, the 7 Ws. You can think of this as the toolkit for building a leadership story that is strong, authentic, and can actually stand up to reality. So here they are: who, what, when, where, why, with, and this last one is so crucial, wish. Now, the key thing to get here is that this is not some checklist you can just pick and choose from. For a leadership story to be truly authentic, you need all 7 of these woven together, working in harmony. All right, let's break this down W by W. For each one, we're going to see how a real, authentic approach gives you a huge advantage, while a superficial one, well, it leads straight to disaster. Everything, and I mean Everything starts with who. And we're not just talking about your job title or what's on your resume. This is the fundamental blueprint of your character, your integrity. See, an authentic who provides the genuine integrity that holds everything else together. It's the foundation. But a weak or superficial who, that is the cracked foundation that absolutely guarantees that whole disaster movie narrative we've been talking about. Next up is what. This is all about the material reality of things. And this is fascinating. The research points out that humans, corporations, even those goat head plants, are all what you could call superorganisms. They're these incredibly complex systems of trillions of living cells all interacting with each other and their environment. So what does that mean for a leader? Well, understanding your organization as this complex, living superorganism gives you a real ecological awareness. But if you ignore that complexity, if you just treat it like a simple machine, you're basically setting yourself up for structural compromises and, you guessed it, public scandals. The third W is when. Now, this isn't about a simple straight line on a calendar. It's about seeing time as a kind of threshold, where the future is constantly arriving, right now. Remember those goat heads you ignored last season? They're part of a future that is literally walking right up to your doorstep. And this just brilliantly illustrates what's at stake. When you proactively deal with issues, you do the preventative maintenance, you pull the goat heads, you gain coherence, things make sense. But if you ignore them, those problems don't just go away, they escalate. And as the source puts it, they arrive with a vengeance. All right, let's talk about where. This is the full, unvarnished context of your environment. It's not the idealized, shiny corporate campus in the brochure. It's the real, messy place, complete with all its challenges. It's the desert that's full of goat heads. When you acknowledge the reality of your where, it gives you the awareness you absolutely need to navigate adversity. But if you ignore that changing context, if you just pretend the goat heads aren't spreading, your entire story is going to unravel, period. Now for why. This is your core motivation, your fundamental purpose. Why are you really doing what you're doing? A strong, authentic why gives you a powerful motive to be constructive, to serve everyone involved. But the moment that why gets watered down to something superficial, like just maximizing shareholder value, the framework argues it is game over. You've just created a system that is destined to fail. The sixth W is with, and this is so important. This is about the entire web of relationships you're a part of. Not just your inner circle, not just your favorite people on the team, but everyone, the whole web. When you build a strong, inclusive web of relationships, you create a coherent and structurally sound organization. But the second that leadership starts playing favorites, creating an in-group and demonizing an out-group, you introduce a fatal weakness that can lead to organizational and even societal collapse. And that brings us to the final W, wish. And listen, this isn't just some vague hope or quarterly goal. It's a genuine aspiration for aliveness, a deep commitment to all life and to sustainability. When your wish is authentic, it acts as a core ethical practice that guides every single action you take. But if it's superficial, it just becomes a hollow PR statement. You know that mission statement that's plastered on the lobby wall but has absolutely no substance behind it? So after all that, what's the big takeaway? It really comes down to a fundamental shift in how you see the world. It's about moving away from an idealized, filtered version of leadership to one that is grounded in messy, complex reality. It really boils down to two kinds of leaders. On one hand, you've got the buoy leader. They're just kind of floating along in an idealized, filtered world, doing everything they can to avoid the tough realities. But then you have the goat head leader. This is the person who boldly faces that complex, thorny world with true ethical integrity, using all 7 W's to build something real, something that lasts. And that leaves us with one final question to really think about. This framework isn't just for CEOs of massive companies. It's for anyone trying to navigate complexity. So take a hard look around your own world. What are the messy, inconvenient, thorny goat heads that you might be filtering out?